Welcome to UK Reporters. I'm Christian Fraser. From here in the BBC Newsroom, we send out correspondents to bring you the best stories from across the UK. In this week's programme, Jeremy Corbyn says he'll bring Labour back to power and deliver the socialism of the 21st century. He told his party conference it was time to unite against the Conservatives and prepare for a general election, possibly next year.
So I ask each and every one of you to accept the decision of the members, end the trench warfare and work together to take on the Tories.
We'll be assessing the challenges facing Mr Corbyn in Oldham, once a Labour stronghold which voted overwhelmingly for Brexit. But the party must now win back its support. Hello, welcome to UK Reporters. I'm Christian Fraser. From here in the BBC Newsroom, we send out correspondents to bring you the best stories from across the UK. In this week's programme, a change is going to come. The Prime Minister's promise to Britain following the referendum result. She tells the Conservative Party conference she'll use the powers of the state to help working class people.
Change has got to come too, because of the quiet revolution that took place in our country just 3 months ago. A revolution in which millions of our fellow citizens stood up and said they were not prepared to be ignored anymore.
Mrs May said the Tories were now the party of the workers. We'll be finding out whether the working class people of Grimsby believe her. After his decisive victory in the opposition Labour leadership election, Jeremy Corbyn told the party conference that socialism for the 21st century would be the foundation of the party's programme. He urged delegates to be prepared for a possible general election as early as next year. The Labour leader urged colleagues to end what he called the trench warfare of the past year and set out a series of policy pledges, including nationalising the railways and defeating Conservative plans for more grammar schools. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg was at the party conference in Liverpool to hear his speech.
The leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
Coming out on top, in charge of his party. So what happens now? There's no change in the devotion of his followers. But this is his offer to you.
Thank you. It's the socialism of the 21st century. Our job is now to win over the unconvinced of our vision. No one will be convinced of a vision promoted by a divided party. We all agree on that. So I ask each and every one of you to accept the decision of the members, end the trench warfare and work together to take on the Tories.
There was no bold offer to colleagues who didn't support him. He needs them if Labour can convincingly make this attack.
This isn't a new government. It's David Cameron's government repackaged with progressive slogans but with a new, harsh, right-wing edge. Who seriously believes that the Tories could ever stand up to the privileged few? They are the party of the privileged few.
There'd be a bigger tax on business to pay for education. But despite the referendum result, on anxieties over immigration, his aims to ease the strains, not cut the numbers.
A Labour government will not offer false promises on immigration, as the Tories have done. We will not sow division by fanning the flames of fear. We will act decisively to end the undercutting of workers' pay and conditions through the exploitation of migrant labour and agency working. Labour will reinstate the Migrant Impact Fund and give extra support to areas of high migration.
He had stern words on anti-Semitism and abuse and urged the party to forget their private battles and focus on the public.
We are 500,000 of us, and there will be many more, working together to make our country the place it could be. Conference, united, we can shape the future and build a fairer Britain in a peaceful world. Thank you.
21st century. But it was more Jeremy Corbyn's greatest hit, a broad outline of his long-held beliefs, than a detailed argument to persuade you to vote Labour at the next election.
Do you think the public is ready for 21st century socialism?
Do you know what? They're ready for it, they need it. And I think it's our job now to explain to them how this system is leaving them behind.
And I'm very pleased that we've got 21st century socialism. I'm absolutely delighted.
Very well received in the audience. I think it could go down well in the country as well.
The people's flag is seen to spread.
Jeremy Corbyn's supporters believe his Labour is much more than a cover version of the party of old. But echoes of the past are all around. He's inspired thousands on the left, but is yet to show that millions will join his chorus. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Liverpool.
The vote to leave the European Union was a once-in-a-generation chance to change the United Kingdom for good. That was the Prime Minister's message to the Conservative conference this week, where she described the referendum result as a quiet revolution, and she promised to address the needs of ordinary working-class people. In stark contrast to some of her predecessors, Theresa May commended the role of the state in improving people's lives. This report by our political editor Laura Kunsberg contains some flash photography.
Take your seats. The new Prime Minister's big performance was about to begin. They were ready to listen, but Theresa May wanted you to as well. It was quiet resolve that propelled her onto the main stage less than 100 days ago.
What's my vision for Britain? My philosophy? My approach?
The referendum changed everything. It's her time now.
In June, people voted for change, and a change is going to come because of the quiet revolution that took place in our country just 3 months ago. A revolution in which millions of our fellow citizens stood up and said they were not prepared to be ignored anymore.
So stand by for a May's meritocracy. Easy to say, much, much harder to make it happen.
I want us to be a country where it doesn't matter where you were born, who your parents are, where you went to school, what your accent sounds like, what God you worship, whether you're a man or a woman, gay or straight, black or white. All that should matter is the talent you have and how hard you're prepared to work.
3 months ago, it might not have been her. Now firmly in charge, Theresa May wants to take her party down a different road.
It's time to remember the good that government can do. Time to reject the ideological templates provided by the socialist left and the libertarian right, and to embrace a new centre ground in which government steps up and not back to act on behalf of us all.
A Tory Prime Minister applauded for praising the state, then using her famous challenge to her own party to go after Labour instead.
The Labour Party is not just divided, but divisive, fighting among themselves, abusing their own MPs, threatening to end their careers, tolerating anti-Semitism and supporting voices of hate. You know what some people call them? The Nasty Party.
Theresa May's offer to you: do the right thing and the government will be on your side. The state can be a force for good. She wants to scoop up voters in the middle as Labour has moved to the left. But ultimately, she'll be judged by what she does, not what she says on the platform. Secretaries of State, what did you make of this speech, both of you?
Brilliant speech, absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic, and sums it up exactly.
Very good speech. Reminds me of Margaret Thatcher's speeches.
Bringing this hall to its feet, the Tory party together, is one thing. Persuading you, the country, to follow her now is a very different endeavour. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Birmingham.
Well, if Mr Corbyn is to succeed in his ambition to be Prime Minister, then Labour must win back support in areas that were once rock solid for the party. Oldham, in Greater Manchester, enjoyed a reputation for industrial prosperity well into the 20th century. But it's facing acute social and economic challenges today. Oldham voted overwhelmingly for Brexit, and many former Labour supporters have switched their allegiance to UKIP. Our special correspondent Alan Little has been assessing the mood.
The annual end of summer carnival has its roots in Oldham's days of industrial greatness. More than 300 cotton mills brought generations of immigrants from Asia. What has globalization done to this town? This year, Oldham was named officially the most deprived town in England. This has always been a Labour fortress, but in the past decade, the UKIP vote here has risen from 3% to 23%. Should Labour be worried?
I always take all these threats very, very seriously. I do, my colleagues do, and my party does. So, we will not sleepwalk into a threat without taking it seriously. They were one agenda party, and that item is now finished. So, they need to reinvent themselves. And if this, we'll have to see how successful they are in reinventing themselves.
In the years when much of Britain was booming in the globalised economy, this is what was happening to Oldham and towns like it. This paper mill closed overnight in 2001. Its 500 workers suddenly, without warning, unemployed. It's as though the pro-Remain half of Britain failed to notice that in all this dereliction, a powerful anti-EU sentiment had been incubating for decades, and that sentiment found its voice at last in the in-out referendum in June. It was, in part at least, a revolt against globalisation, a revolt against open borders. But to what extent was it also a revolt by people who have always voted Labour against the Labour Party?
How about some strawberries?
Strawberries. English.
Marlene Nurse is a retired schoolteacher and had always voted Labour, until she went to a UKIP meeting out of curiosity.
It was an eye-opener. He was just speaking common sense. We haven't heard this before. We never hear this from the Labour Party or the Conservative or anyone. This is what we want. And from then on, we were committed.
So if I were a Labour MP or councillor here in Oldham, should I be scared?
I hope so.
Real votes in real elections are still falling Labour's way in Oldham, but UKIP has emerged from the referendum with renewed energy and momentum, challenging Labour's claim to be the authentic voice in its own heartlands. Alan Little, BBC News, Oldham.
So, Mrs May says the Conservatives are now the party of the workers. But do working class people believe her? And will they vote for her? Danny Savage has spent the day talking to some of them in the fishing port of Grimsby.
Catch of the day. Now the Prime Minister is casting out her net to bring in those who've drifted away from the Tories or who've never supported them. Roger, a Labour man, isn't convinced.
So when Theresa May says she wants her party to be the party of the working class people, what do you think?
Rubbish. Rubbish, yeah. It'll never happen.
You don't think it will ever happen?
No, it'll never happen, no.
The factory looks out on the changing horizons of the Humber. Fish processing and renewable energy are the main employers, sitting alongside the older refineries, chemical plants and shipping. This area has changed with the times and is proud to have done so.
But ordinary working class families.
What the PM says is listened to here. Upstairs in marketing, Lisa likes Theresa May, but wants better prospects for her sons from the Tories.
Apprenticeships which give them more understanding, better skills, better qualification, without having the need to go to university to acquire these, higher degrees which might not serve them so well in the future.
As for the boss, he thinks Mrs May went fishing for votes today, and that's not a priority.
We all work, and so let's get rid of the class. When she says she's going to reach out to working class people, I feel like it's a little bit of a pitch for election, trying to get people who are a little bit disenchanted with what's happened in the Labour Party. Good luck to it, but let's not pitch for an election now. Let's get Brexit sorted.
One factory, a range of views. People are engaging and listening. but mainly out of deep concern about what happens next. Danny Savage, BBC News, Grimsby.
It's no good harking back to the tired old economic and political fixes of 20 and 30 years ago, because they won't work anymore. The old model is broken. We're in a new era that demands a politics and economics that meets the needs of our own time. Actually, even Theresa May gets it, sort of, that people want change. That's why she stood on the steps of Downing Street and talked about the inequalities and burning injustice in today's Britain. Well, she said it. In fact, she promised a country that works not for a privileged few, but for every one of us. But even if she manages to talk the talk, there are problems about walking the walk. This isn't a new government. It's David Cameron's government repackaged with progressive slogans, but with a new, harsh, right-wing edge, taking the country backwards and dithering before the historic challenges of Brexit. Who seriously believes that the Tories could ever stand up to the privileged few? They are the party of the privileged few. Funded by the privileged few, for the benefit of the privileged few. Theirs is a party, after all, that now wants to force through an undemocratic boundary review based on an out-of-date version of the electoral register with nearly 2 million voters missing. They've dressed it up as a bid to cut the cost of politics by abolishing 50 constituencies, but the 12 million savings are dwarfed by the expense of the 260 peers David Cameron appointed at a cost of £34 million a year. It's nothing more than a cynical attempt to gerrymander the next election. And this is from a Prime Minister who was elevated to a job without a single vote being cast after a pantomime farce which saw one leading Tory after another falling on their swords. When I meet Theresa May across the dispatch box, I know that only one of us has been elected to the office they hold by the votes of 1/3 of a million people.